Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Glad to have you back again. What we're going to be doing today is we're starting a new series. We're going to be looking at some games from our former world champion, Mikhail Tal. And we're just looking at Tal's response with the white pieces to the main line of the Caro-Kann, which you see here on the screen. So this is only going to be games in this variation. Caro-Kann, knight c3, d takes, knight takes e4, and then bishop f5. So games where other lines of the Caro-Kann are played, such as knight f6, will be looked at in another video. But for now, we're just looking at this main response, bishop f5, and how Tal dealt with it throughout the career. And now, if you're familiar with these videos that I do like this, I cover the losses, wins, and draws. So it's not like I'm, skipping or trying to make, a GM look better or worse or anything like that. It's just real facts on how that player dealt with a particular opening. I know there's a lot of Tao fans out there, and people looking for antidotes to the Caro-Kann. And one of the ways I learned, uh, chess was following heroes. It wasn't always inspirational for me just to look in the opening manual or just follow lines off a computer or something like that. I like to see how certain type of players responded to an opening and get a feel from it that way by looking at their games. So relax and enjoy this time, and let's see how Tao did against this very solid opening as black. First, we're gonna start out 1955 in the Soviet Championship semifinals in Riga. It's Tao versus Georgy Levitsky with the black pieces. So from this position, Tao played the standard move, knight g3, bishop g6, h4, h6. In here, Tao played the move knight h3. Knight f3, of course, is the main line, or h5 sometimes, but usually knight f3 is played. Knight d7, knight f4. And so now you see his idea was to harass the bishop without committing to h6 right away. Excuse me, h5, bishop h7, and now bishop c4, e5. And so we can see now, conversely, one of the downsides of having the knight on f4 like that is that e4, the e5 advance is not guarded adequately, and so black is able to liberate his position with e5 rather easily. Just picture if the knight is here on f3, like in the main lines, it's a little more difficult for for black rather, to get in the move e5. Queen e2, queen e7, d takes, queen takes, bishop e3, a little more pressure. Bishop takes e5, queen takes e2. All of this is forced, and you can see the game rapidly heading for a draw. Tao has some, small lead in activity, but with the exchange of pieces, quickly dwindles down to nothing. And here, the players agreed to a draw. And we're gonna go to our next game, and this game took place in 1959, the Soviet Championships. Again, Tao with the white pieces versus legendary Grandmaster Paul Keres. And now in 1959, this is Tao at his absolute peak, 1 year before winning the World Chess Championship. So Tao is, just at the height of his powers at this point. Again, from this position, bishop f5, knight g3, bishop g6, and now we see knight f3. Now we're back in the normal familiar territory. Knight d7, h4, h6, and now you see bishop d3. Again, h5 is main line, then followed by bishop h7, then bishop d3. It was known back in those days as the Spassky variation. Bishop d3, Bishop takes, queen takes, knight g f6, bishop f4, queen a5 check, c3, e6, castles, bishop e7. The rook comes to the center. This all standard Caro-Kann stuff where white has a space advantage, but black is extremely solid. Knight f5. Tal is just exploiting that the bishop on e7 is unprotected, trying to start something up. Tal plays the move. Knight takes g7. Very provocative move. Remember, this is Tal at his peak, so he was making a lot of speculative sacrifices that sometimes they just worked out anyway because the opponent couldn't deal with the um, myriad of complications that would ensue. More, more practical, I guess, is just knight takes e7, just getting rid of that last bishop, and then perhaps following up with knight d2 with maybe the idea to come to c4 and then keeping an eye on the e5 square also. So knight g7, knight takes g7 was played. King takes g7, and now knight e5. And Tal's idea is very simple. He creates a wedge type situation in the center where it's hard for black to bring protection to the king side. And while black is trying to organize his defense, he wants to use his open e file along with the open third rank and g file to harass the king. Carries plays rook h8, queen h3, rook h7. Now c4. This prohibits the use of d5 by black. Knight f8, rook a d1, rook d8, bishop d2, hitting the queen. And now Tal reorganizes his bishop on a soon to be open diagonal. At least that's what he hopes. And we can see the idea. But Keres is organized his defense in a very economical fashion, and he really doesn't have too much to worry about. Here he played the move knight e8. Another possibility is simply playing rook g7, and it's hard to see what white is going to do at this point. Maybe rook g3, but then again, pieces just start getting traded off. So knight e8 was played, rook g3, and instead of trading the rooks with the rook g7, which to me looks more natural and obvious, he played knight g7, still keeping pieces on the board. To me, this makes things better for white because this rook is out of play. So why not just trade it off? The other rook comes up, f6, knight g6, knight takes, rook takes, and now king f7. There's h5, queen a6, and just b3 by Tal. And of course, Tal wants to tempt black into taking his pawn and, just again gaining time. So right now at this point, Tal is just bluffing basically, and he's pretty much busted here. But he's able to, keep the position complicated enough to where his opponent cannot find a clear path to victory. D5, c takes, rook takes, rook takes, queen d3. So we see that although pieces are coming off the board, that Tal is still able to create enough disturbances in the position whereby Keres just can't relax at this point. His king is exposed. There's a couple of loose pawns. He has to worry about various things like queen d5 check, for example. Even the queen coming to g6 at some point when the rook on g6 moves. Queen a6, natural response to try to get rid of the queens. Takes a pawn. And now queen e6. Tal turns that offer down to trade queens. And finally, this rook that could have been traded a long time ago on G7 is trying to work itself into the game now. And now, to get into the game, bishop takes H6 happens, and now there's a threat against the knight. Queen E1, King H2, Queen E5 check, King G1, Knight F5 by Keres, Bishop F4, some more checking. Now mate is threatened, so King H3, Rook D4, Rook G4, Queen D1, and finally that H pawn is white salvation. And he hopes it is his salvation, but it didn't work out because after knight takes G3, he was forced to resign because after Tal was the queen here, then just simply a move like knight E4 would have been too much for black to handle. So knight E4, discover check, of course, King H2, and then you got this bishop coming here. So it was a valiant effort by Tal, trying to keep the position, the game murky, but at the end it was just too much for him to handle. And the real losing move was is H6 right here, but he knew he was lost anyway, so he just had to try something. Because basically he had to just go into the endgame at this point and just play queen, just submit to being a piece down in the ending, and one pawn for the piece is just not enough in this position. So we see Tal losing to a great player in Paul Keres. And again, that sacrifice might have worked against a lesser player, but Keres is one of the all-time greats. So this knight takes G7, although interesting, definitely not sound. And knight takes E7, rook takes E7. There's a good move to make for white, followed by like knight E5 or even knight D2 with the idea of knight C4. This is Botvinnik with the black pieces. And this is the 5th game of the World Championship in 1960. Here we see Tal playing the move knight E2 here. And again, you can see his fondness toward this idea of bringing the knight to F4 without committing the pawn to H5. You can see this rapid development, but black's position is extremely solid. G6, both parties castle queenside. And white just has a little more space as he occupies the first 4 ranks. But for compensation, black has the better pawn structure, which will serve him, in the ending. Tal finds a target on E6. Botvinnik attacks the H pawn, and eventually this game was drawn also. So we can see so far, in his career so far, that the Caro-Kann is a good choice against a fierce attacking player like Tal. That against Keres, he had a hard time, and even in this game against Botvinnik, he wasn't really able to make much progress so far. So during the matches with Botvinnik, he would face the Caro-Kann a lot, and I think that sparked or inspired a lot of players to pick up the Caro-Kann, as it is a good weapon against very sharp attacking players. And sometimes players will overpress, trying to, for lack of a better term, like refute the opening. But if you look at black structure, this Caro-Slav structure is like extremely solid, and you have to be patient. It's very hard to just overrun. All right, so moving on. to our next game. This is game 7. So Tal had a little bit of time to uh, study, of course, with his seconds. And this is still the World Championship. This is game 7 between Tal with the white pieces and Botvinnik. So again, we enter into this same line. And here we see knight d7 being employed by Botvinnik. And remember, if you recall in the first game that we looked at with the where Tal played, he wanted to play h4, knight h3, and then knight f4. The knight being on f4 allowed Black to resolve his problems in the center by just playing e5 and hitting the knight. So that's where knight d7 comes in. So h4 is played, h6, and here's knight f4, hitting the bishop. The bishop moves out of the way, and now on bishop c4, e5. And then we go into this variation, which Tal has no doubt prepared. So queen e7, knight is actually threatened to be captured on f4. Queen takes e5, and now bishop e3. Tal avoids the exchange of pieces. So what Tal has basically gotten Black to do is open up the position, right, while he's like still somewhat undeveloped. So he's kind of provoked the e5 response, right, which is like a natural move that you want to get. But look at the development of the black pieces as opposed to the white pieces, and he even does this at the cost of a pawn. He doesn't care about the pawn on b2. All right, so this is like the mind of an attacking player here. All right, so he gets the open position, right? He doesn't want to block, Caro-Kann position, with all his maneuvering. He wants open files, and this is exactly what he has. So now Botvinnik plays bishop c5. Bishop takes c5. This is forced because Tal didn't want to have a, just isolated e pawn. So queen takes e2, king takes e2, and now knight takes c5. So now we have this drawish looking ending here. b4, bishop b3. And now here we have this, it's a complicated middle game here. It reminds me a little bit of the middle games that go on in the Ruy Lopez um, Berlin variation. Not the same pawn structure, but the fact that it's not a typical end game. That it's like a more like a middle game than an ending. It's just a queenless middle game. A lot of things can still go wrong with all the pieces on the board. So rook e d1, a5 from Botvinnik. He activates his rook, and Tal nails down the d file. And now this gives Tal a chance to strike tactically here, and basically there's a fork on f6 at the end. So rook takes, knight takes, rook takes, king takes, knight f6, king d6, and now knight g8. And there's no doubt in my mind that Botvinnik saw all of this and welcomed this continuation because of the simplicity of the position, or the apparent simplicity of it. So rook c5, Tal attacks the f pawn, f6, attacks it again. And now at this point, there's no real way to continue to preserve those f and g pawns as they stand. So Botvinnik takes the c pawn, f pawn drops, more simplification, and rook b5. So we see Tal has a two knights versus the rook, and now we see two pieces against the rook, and Tal gets his pawns going first. And to me, this is one of the games from Tal that you don't, see a lot, because it's not a, some type of spectacular sacrifice or, um, checkmating attack. But you see his ability to play complicated middle games and nice endings here. against one of the greatest that ever done it. At this point, Botvinnik is totally lost. White's pawns are too fast, and he has an extra minor piece. So even if he needed to sacrifice or something like that, that's not a problem. He gets his king over, and now there it goes. And Tal just keeps that G pawn put to make sure he blocks the black pawns, and Botvinnik was forced to resign at the 52 move. So fantastic game uh, by Tal in this particular variation here. Okay, this is game 9. So 2 games later, now Botvinnik has had a chance to research a little bit, and again Tal trots out the same variation. Knight f4, bishop goes back, and now e6. Remember before Botvinnik had played knight d7, and with the idea of playing e5. This time, Botvinnik keeps it real solid and keeps the Caro-Slav formation intact and just plays e6. And he's just going to simply develop his pieces first. So castles, bishop d6, and now Tal plays knight takes e6, f takes e6, and bishop takes e6. This no doubt keeps the black king in the middle. And I would say that there's no doubt that Botvinnik probably looked at this continuation also. Does White have compensation? Definitely, but this is a type of sacrifice where a positional sacrifice whereby you have to play accurate for a long, long time. And so that puts a lot of pressure. So the sacrifice may have been sound, but then you have to play accurate for 30 moves. So is it practical to do that? Queen c7, rook e1, knight bd7, bishop g8, king scoots to the side, trade, trade. All right, knight f5. So what does White have in compensation? He has the king, in the middle of the board. Black's pieces, namely the rooks, are not in the game yet. The rook on h7 is out of the game. It's some discoordination in Black's camp, and White has 2 pawns for the piece. So he has some definite compensation. But again, this is more of a positional sacrifice than, like a mating attack or something like that. There's the third pawn. Another piece is traded off. Queen d3, threatening g6, of course. King comes up, and the queen is attacked. And notice how is Tal offering it the ending here, and of course you can't really go into it because, well, you can go into it, but the continuation would be a proper continuation. Have to check here, 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 rook e1, and then just king f7 again. And again, White definitely has compensation here. The game's probably equal. Botvinnik takes first, and then exchanges. c4 from Tal, knight g4, d5, c takes, and now attacks the pawn, d6, rook to f7, rook c1, rook d7, rook c7, king f7, some more trades. And to me, this kind of exacerbates the advantage of Black trading down, and also makes it much easier for Black to deal with now. And I think here, by this time, White is close to losing. Once that pawn is stopped, at this point, I don't think that white has too much going for him in this position. Yeah, there's no way that white can even hold this game at this point. He's just down a piece, and we see Tal making some maneuvers. Notice how Botvinnik fixes the G pawns because they're doubled, and so in this situation they're pretty valueless. And there's a great valiant effort by Tal, of course, to try to hold on, but there's nothing that he can really do, and he was forced to resign. So again, we see this early example of an early sacrifice in the right out of the opening by Tal, and it didn't work out. The first time we saw the early sacrifice when he sacrificed his knight on G7, and then here we see it uh, at E6. And again, it's not that the sacrifice is bad or anything. It's just that the practicality of it is what I'm questioning, because the fact that you're not getting an immediate reward and you have to play accurately for so long. So, good game by Botvinnik and coming back and avenging his loss in the same line. Game 15, Caro-Kann tried it out again. Here we see different view from Tal, bringing the bishop out. And notice that Tal loves to place his pieces aggressively at this point in his career. E6. There's a knight going to E2 again. So he loved bringing his knight to F4, attacking the bishop. H4, H6. There it is. And this time Botvinnik just whips the knight off. His knight F6. Again, notice the rapid development by Tal. Right, all of his pieces, all of his pieces are in the game. Even the rook on the H file, you can count that. However, the Caro-Kann position, the Yaroslav structure is very solid, and White still has to figure out a way to break through. Bishop drops back, more trades. Queen takes F4, Knight D5, Queen E5, castles, Knight E4, offering to trade the queens. Tal says no. Rook D8, Knight B6, and at this point, Black can pretty much claim equality. I mean, White has a minimal advantage, so a little bit better pieces, some more space, but nothing that's going to translate to anything. And we see the systematic trades from Botvinnik, of course. Looking forward to being able to play C5, and that'll definitely be good for Black. You see here, White has basically maximized the position. His piece is in an excellent spot, but again, he just doesn't have enough to get through at this point. And Black is trying to prepare C5 here, and there it is. And once he does this, then he has good counterplay of his own. And these plays drew this game. So that was game number 15 of the World Championship. Again, these players are stubborn. 2 games later, game 17. Again, Tal versus Botvinnik, same variation. This time, Botvinnik doesn't even bother with playing H6. He just brings the bishop out. And now he has to open H file to compensate for his doubled pawns. Tal leaving castles on the same side. F4, protecting the bishop. Botvinnik wants to utilize the H file castles on the opposite wing. Here comes Tal with his attack on the queen side. And his attack is going to be first. Queen b3, a4, a5, knight c8, queen e3, keeping an eye on that pawn. And now queen e5 is offering the endgame himself. And if queen takes here, then f takes e5, and this is better for white. Notice the vulnerability of the f pawn back here. So rook h8, b5. And now that the b file is open, Tal rescinds his offer to trade queens. c5, king a8, bishop f3. And Botvinnik is holding up well, but this is Tal's type of game. Just putting pressure on his opponent's position. And constantly attacking his opponent. Queen c7, queen a3, rook b6, queen takes f4. And you have to remember too, at this point, Botvinnik was getting older, and playing these type of games with Tal. As the games are going on, and Tal's able to put more and more pressure on him. It's nerve-wracking having somebody just constantly attacking you. And what happens sometimes, especially like with the older player and constantly being put under pressure, they become susceptible to usually like one move blunders. A lot of times the moves will be from equal positions, or they defended successfully for 10, 15 moves, and one move they just throw the whole game away. Karpov fell victim to this many times, especially against Kasparov. Many of the games he was either better or he was headed toward a draw, and just a simple one move blunder would happen. But it was just as a result of being under pressure for so long. This game here continued with queen e4. Excellent move. Although white's pieces are aggressively posted, again, there's no way to really get through the position. Botvinnik has defended well at this point, but Tal just keeps nagging. Queen b3, so you got to worry about three heavy pieces on the b7 pawn. And then finally, the most natural move, right? Obviously, Botvinnik sees that, hey, I can't take this knight because just simply rook takes b7. So he sees that, so he doesn't fall for that. Instead, he makes the real natural move. He says, okay, let me alleviate the pressure off of this pawn by trading. He's like, obviously, Tal doesn't want to play that move. Right, and the knight takes d5. I mean, black is winning almost, right? Definitely in the driver's seat. This means that Tal would have to play a move like queen b2 or something like that. And again, that's good for black also. However, the magician from Riga played a spectacular move. Rook takes a6. And this is just based on the simple tactics right here. If king takes a6, then of course queen b6 is going to mate, or queen a4 mates. So either here or here mates. If b takes a6, then this square is unprotected. The king is driven back. And now this queen takes a6, and you can see the vulnerability of this rook here. And this is what seals the deal here, because the only move to stop mate is rook a7. And then you have queen takes c8. And that's the idea that combination is based on after queen d5. So instead of queen d5 there, Botvinnik had to play king a8. But again, just being under pressure. And this move took place at move 39. So he might have been even under time pressure also. And again, psychologically, he's been under pressure a long time, wants to get rid of the queens and makes this move. And then again, Tal just being Tal strikes like a bolt of lightning, and it's just over after that. The king b8 and queen a4, and then Botvinnik just resigned at this point. It's probably a very difficult and frustrating loss. If he tries to run out with the king to with the idea of getting the d8, then just simply queen a5, taking over this diagonal, and there's nothing to do here. b6 capture. If b8, then just simply rook a8. Now we get in the time machine. So, as most of us know our chess history, we know that Tal won that first match and became uh, world champion in 1960. Well, Botvinnik had a lot of rematch clauses, and in 1961 he had a rematch with Tal, and not to be deterred, he came right back with the Caro-Kann. This is game two. Tal with the white pieces, Botvinnik with the black. And we see this same variation. And theory didn't move as fast as it does today. With engines and teams of seconds, theory was a little bit slower. So he could come back a year later and maybe with a slight adjustment, and the variation will still be useful. But nowadays, you probably couldn't do that. Use one variation in one match and then come back in the rematch with the same preparation. Just dust off the dust off the analysis and bring it out. So after knight d5, knight gh5, again probing the position, playing g6. Excuse me, probing g7. Bishop b3, knight d7. The bishop here is gone now. Knight g3, and now queen h4. Again, at this point, the position is for all intents and purposes equal, but it's about getting to a position that you like to play and that has chances. So Tal has the bishop here. He has more space. He has an opportunity to play c4 here, and perhaps at some point generate some type of offensive on the king side. But black is well placed in this position for a king side attack. Queen d3, rook a d8, rook e1. Knight 7 f6. Again, you can't really get any more solid than this here for black. h3, bishop f4. So game continues. c3, b6, queen f3. Botvinnik trades, and here again, absolute equality for black. Nothing to worry about. Offers traded queens. Again, you see this common theme of trying to quench Tal's activity. Common theme. Always offering these end games. c5. Finally getting the break that you look for in the Caro-Slav. Rook cd1. Now queen c7. D takes and b takes. And this denies the access of the pieces on the on d4. So for instance, being able to bring the rook here and then swing it over to the king side. Again, some trades, right? More trades, common theme. And again, while watching these videos, you should also be thinking in larger terms, not just about this opening in particular, but just how look and learn how to deal with aggressive and attacking players. If you look at Botvinnik's strategy, now he didn't win all the games. Like he lost, he lost a lot. I mean, Tal was a great player, but that doesn't mean his strategy for just playing against the attacking player was wrong. This general strategy of just basically playing openings that don't give rise to a lot of tactical melees. Like for instance, he didn't come out with the Sicilian knight off against Tal or something like that. Played real solid, kept a solid pawn structure, and then he gradually facilitates trades. Now sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't, but just keep the strategy in mind. Tal has a bishop, so bishop c4. Queen D2, Queen C7, Bishop F1, King F8. And what's dangerous for white in this position is the bishop. Excuse me, dangerous for black is that white has his bishop and he has a 3-2 pawn majority on the queen side, which means as the pawns get advanced, the bishop will be able to support their advance along with the queen, and as the position becomes more and more open, the bishop will become stronger. So now the idea is to create this pass pawn by pushing the majority. Notice the continued offering of the exchange of queens by Botvinnik. Here is a tactical problem. Can't really take here now because of this check, right? But there's also mate. So take your pick. You either want to mate or you want the piece. All right. So King G8. Now, what was interesting though is this move is very provocative by Tal. Again, he's advancing the pawn. It can't be taken tactically. But instead of playing King G8, which now he's threatening to take, he could have put more pressure and attack this pawn again, which is pretty interesting. And like if Queen A6, then Queen G8. I'm sorry, Queen B8, and this pawn is under a lot of pressure. Like for example, if he played B5, you got Queen C7, and now you have like this blockade going on where, for instance, B6, knight takes. You're dropping material, so it's hard for white to advance. I like Queen F4 there. He did King G8, which renews the threat somewhat. Now A5 from Tal, Queen E1, so you can see the same idea. Double threat and a pawn, but now Queen D4, and now Tal will get his passed pawn anyway after this is captured. A6, B5, and there it is. So now Bishop B5, and white is in the driver's seat here. And again, like we discussed in the last game, sometimes the pressure of long games on an older player sometimes cause one move blunders to happen. And here in a worse position, no doubt, Botvinnik plays the move B3. Again, he figures Tal is racing toward the queen. Let me push so that I can distract him also from making a queen. And Tal simply played the move Queen A4 here, and there's nothing can be done here. If and Botvinnik resigned like right on the spot here. If Queen takes A4 here and then Knight C7, making sure this guy doesn't queen, then you just drop this pawn, and now this is threatened, and the knight can't move. So King F7. And then you just start moving these pawns. So you play move like H4, F4, H4, and this pawn is gonna be a killer since the knight has to stick over there and watch that, in the long term. So that was a good start for Tal in the beginning of the World Championship, the World Chess Championship, because no doubt he probably figured that. I'm not saying he figured that, but maybe the fans at the time figured that he would just win again. After all, he's young. Botvinnik's older, and he would just retain his title. But we all know the history, and that Tal would lose his title, and that was the last Caro-Kann game in the World Chess Championship for Tal. And now we move forward to the Amsterdam Interzonal in 1964. So Tal is still a very strong player, but he's not the Tal from 57 to 1960. At this point, you start seeing Tal. If you follow his career, it's like more flashes of that. Where from 57 to 60, he was playing just out of his mind, like all like in every tournament, he was winning everything. And after the matches with Botvinnik, you saw flashes where he would go in a tournament and just kill everybody, and then he would just have a bad tournament. He was like up and down, up and down. He would make it to the candidates tournaments, of course, and he had some great candidates matches with Larson, Korsnoy, etc. Um, but he just never was the same, you know, just consistent player after that. So against this game against Alberto Fogelman with the black pieces, we see him going for his beloved knight 1e2 here, knight f6, and again same type of idea. There's e5, queen e2, and he goes into this variation. Position gets opened up, and this is what Tal wants. Again, knight e6, just very provocative provocative play from Tal. Like what a style. And of course it's sound here because the knight on e5 is attacked twice. But many players would have just played, say, like knight d3 or something like that. So f6 now, and basically black wants to take the piece, be able to take the piece for free. Rook a d1. Oh, now Tal is fully developed. Um, what's interesting about this move, Rook a d1, is a tactical flaw. A tactical flaw here. Bishop b3 was definitely correct with equality. Now, after the correct looking Rook a d1, black can just play knight takes here. Knight takes c4. So taking the bishop here, queen takes c4, and notice this pawn is on prise, but that's not what we're looking for. It's kind of like when the DEA does these big drug investigations, right? They're not trying to capture like the guy on the street, the drug dealer on the street. They're trying to get the big fish. In this case, it's this guy right here. So just simply bishop g8. And so basically this is kind of forced. Knight takes f8. Queen gives up itself. Bishop here. Bishop takes c4. Of course, the knight has to, this is all forced pretty much. Knight takes, and now another pin. And, you get, then the situation is pretty much resolved at this point. So knight here, takes, and now I'm just going on. But in this particular position, black is better. He ends up the exchange, right? White only has a pawn for the exchange. Now, of course, I didn't see that far, but I think this is what is good to me. I'm looking, I looked up to about here, to this part, winning the exchange. So Fogelman played bishop g6 instead, and f4. And again, Tal was an interesting player, definitely. Some of these moves make me laugh because they're just so over the top. Um, Again, just f4, just ripping. I mean, you would think like his king, Tal has his king on g1. Why would he want to play a move like f4 and open up that the g file like that? So g takes f4, knight takes f4 by Tal, queen h7, and black is surely in the driver's seat here. He plays bishop c5, natural move, bishop d4, queen h2, King F2. Tal brings it back. Excuse me, not Tal. Fogelman brings it back. So at this point, Black is very close to winning here. After that move F4, which was incorrect. Tal trades. Knight takes. Queen has to move. Bishop D6. Rook takes. Bishop takes. Um, this move lets lets white off the hook just enough. I mean, after rook takes here, knight takes. I mean, what you know? What is king G1, and then you pick that up, and you're just winning here for as white. Instead, he does bishop takes E8, which avoids, of course, this. But let's let's white off the hook. Right, he takes there, takes a bunch of pieces get exchanged, and now just like that, white who's better. Now just look at the difference between variations. If he took with the rook, if he takes with the rook here, of course this doesn't work because this knight, you just simply capture this knight. This is why knight takes G6 has to be played, and then of course you just take there, and there's no way rook H1 is played. This helps Tal out tremendously, and now he just takes over. So basically, Fogelman had a one move blunder situation, and it's all due to Tal's psychological pressure that he constantly put on his opponents. If you're looking for a sound scientific play, I do not suggest Tal to follow. But if you're looking for like somebody that if you're looking for like the psychological part, and I'll just go through the rest of these moves quickly. Tal went on to win. Tal is a good player to study because he reminds me of Lasker in that, not so much his style because Lasker wasn't as wild, but just a mentality where he would play like very provocative moves to get certain reactions out of the opponent. Now, many times the moves would not be correct. Like Tal's F4 was not correct, and he was almost losing. However, the opponent went astray, 3 or 4 moves in, and Tal just took over and won. So just to have that gambler's mentality at such a high level is interesting to me. This is a game against Botvinnik. This is another Soviet tournament in 1964. Again, you can see Tal's preference for this particular variation. And Botvinnik is able to secure, and I'm moving fast because Botvinnik is able to secure the draw easily. Again, same strategy against Tal. He just strategically and methodically just trades off the pieces and shuts down the activity of Tal. So Botvinnik definitely kind of had it figured out, like how to play against Tal. Although sometimes Tal would slip a quick 20 move win in there. He pretty much, he got kind of laid the blueprint for the world to emulate against Tal. But what was interesting is that even though he did that, like Tal was still destroying players in 30, 25 to 30 moves. Top level grandmasters all the way up to the end of his life. This next game is from 1971. It's the Russian Championship. Took place in Leningrad, or St. Petersburg, and Tal was 26-20 at the time, so we have like official ratings now. Um, Yuri Balashov, young Yuri Balashov with the super chess memory, was rated 2570 at the time. There's some offbeat line right here. Queen f3, right to the point. Is he just gonna win a piece, right? e6, bishop d3, knight d7, knight e2, bishop g6, bishop f4, knight d, f6. Tal avoids the trade of the knight and brings the knight to a more aggressive square. Knight d5, bishop takes g6, h takes g6, and bishop d2, revealing an attack on f7. Knight h6, castle queenside. Trademark of Tal again, the activity and rapid development. Okay, so even though Caro-Kann was like super solid, and he couldn't always break through. And I'll be honest with you, it seemed like to me that Tal did have his troubles against the Caro-Kann. Um, as far as like breaking through and such, but you can see that in every game, like he's always active. Like he might have made some unsound sacrifices and lost, but in most of the games he's like always active. Only one I really see kind of shutting him down and getting him to simplify everything is Botvinnik. The way Botvinnik was playing against him and trading down and getting him into these endings, but he still held his own in the endings. So here against Balashov, Tal has the queens on the board, and basically he's getting to play a game that he wants to play. So here, with the threat of c5 coming, now maybe just move the rook out the way is better. Maybe rook df8 or rook de8. Instead, he grabs his pawn, knight takes c4, he gives up the exchange, bishop takes d8, rook d8, and now knight c3, bishop takes, h takes, knight f5, queen e2. So there are some exchanges taking place, but white is up the exchange. g4, knight d4, again provocative move from Tal, because he could have played queen e5 first. Instead, knight takes d4. He hits the knight first, and now he plays this move. Knight f3, queen takes g7, queen e7, exchanging, and now it's Tal just willing, going into the sunset with the easy victory. Just being up in a clear exchange. Last ditch effort by Black to create something, and a nice game by Tal. 31 move demolition there. Is Tal, 1971 in the Russian championship, 39th Russian championship against Leonid Sheshkovich. And we can see Tal again with this straightforward development. You can't really develop faster than this guy. So, so if you have trouble getting your pieces out, it's just look at Tal's games. So again, knight takes, and bishop e3 with c8, protecting the second rank there. Preparing g4, d4, rook e d8, g5, bishop e7, now h4, e5, knight b5, exchange, knight c3, bishop d6. And Tal's problem here at this point is the exposure of his king. He's now overcommitted somewhat, and now these pawns don't look as threatening. They look like more like ripe fruits that Black is about to pick. Knight d5, there it is, queen h3, queen to f1, and simply just snatches the pawn. e4. That opens the line for that bishop on d6. Rook e1. Knight d3. And we can see the pieces just flooding in from Sheshkovich. Even stronger is just e takes here, because the knight really can't be captured here. Little sample variation right there. Black's pieces are basically just all over white here at this point. Rook takes c3. E takes f3. Rook takes f3. Bishop d2. No problem. c5 and rook e8. And Tal had to resign there. So out of all the games that we saw, and we saw Tal lose quite a few games so far. To me, this is the most devastating one. I mean, he overcommitted with his attack, and Black made him pay for it. And that's a big theme in the Caro-Kann, and a big theme in openings like the French defense. Any type of openings where you basically sit back and tell White to take the center and come and get you. Those are big themes. Is the idea of counterattacking at the right time. Is that White overextends, you work yourself behind the pawns that are rushing forward, and you crush your opponent and make him pay for coming in. And this is what you see in the classic example here, where you see the pawns advance on g5 and h4, and then you see Black slip behind the pawns and then just tear White's position apart. Moscow, 1973. This is the 41st Russian championship, a Soviet championship at the time. In our next game from the Russian championship, 1973, Tal is playing a player named Overkin, who is about 2460. And I show you this position to give you an example of what I was saying earlier about how Tal would often pressure his opponents so much that they would just make simple one-move blunders. After 69 moves, the move rook takes a4 was played by Tal, and after the move knight c7, or even a move like knight f8, knight c7 or knight f8, white is slightly better because he has those two outside passes, but definitely survivable, and Black has good chances to draw. All right, staying active. He has this majority of his own. Possibly could pick up one of these pawns. However, Overkin played this move rook c4, right? With the idea he's attacking this pawn, and he figures, hey, this knight really can't move because he'll pick up the rook. So he figuring he's paralyzing the the black pieces or the white pieces somewhat. And Tal ended the game with one move. He just simply played knight d5, and there's no way to protect against this threat without losing a great amount of material. The threat is mate here. If you don't see it, this knight to e7, and so just like that, the game was over. Of course, the game started off in typical fashion, typical Tal fashion. He loved getting that knight to f4, and he had a normal Caro-Kann middle game from his standards. But I just wanted to show you that because many of these games, Tal wasn't necessarily better or anything. Even though in that game he was slightly better, but the style of game he played and the amount of pressure he put on opponents often caused them to make um, just inexplicable blunders. This game is from 1975, Las Palmas, round 9, and he's playing international master Orestes Rodriguez. And you see Tal playing in a more traditional approach now, that you might be familiar with. And again, rapid piece development. And already after picking up this pawn, um, White is just better, like right out of the opening. 94, bishop c7, queen c2. You know, he has the center, better development, space. I mean, what more can you ask from the white position? Knight c3, f5 compromises the position even more. Knight f6, knight e2 from Tal, castles. Bishop f4, bishop a5 check. All right, so king f1 was played, queen e8, and again another one move blunder, and bishop d6. And the idea is, of course, at the rook f7, there's really nowhere for the rook to go. So if rook f7, then just knight e5, and then you're just giving up the exchange. So I find that an interesting component. Looking at Tal's games, is how many players would make one move blunders, and I can only attribute that to just the amount of pressure. And of course, his reputation preceded him, but just the great amount of pressure he would put, you know, and he would get so active, and I guess he would make players feel like they had to do something. And then many times, especially if they were a lower class player than he was, you know, would just make the incorrect choices. It's a few more. There's a game from Bugogno, 1978. Again, same variation. This is against Milan Vukic. And you can see that he loved bringing his knight to f4. That's kind of like the... And here's that sacrifice again that we saw against Botvinnik. Botvinnik was able to win that game, although we had said that the sacrifice was sound, but White needed to play accurately for a long time. It's just one of those positional sacrifices. Here, Black plays very good, but is not able to, turn his advantage into anything substantial. And these players went on the draw. So I'll leave that right there. So that's like an interesting sacrifice. Is this knight takes e6? It's something like if you're white and you want to surprise your opponent, it's definitely something studying because it's not a bad sacrifice. And I think it would surprise a lot of players. You get hit with that, you know. So something to look into. So that game was drawn, and the next game was in the same tournament. That was round one. Now we're in round five of Bugogno 1978, and he's playing against the strong grandmaster Portish. And against Portish, he plays more respectable. Portish is a very strong grandmaster, so he kind of plays along with the theory here. Does Tal. Again, rapid development, trademark. Just getting a constant probing with the knights attacking. And just good sound defense by Portish. And now Portish had played Tal in the candidates match. I think it was the 1966 cycle. I don't remember, but I have that on my in my list of videos. If you want to check the playlist, look at that match. That was an interesting match that Tal won. I think it was the 1965 cycle for the 66 World Championship. Again, these players drew here at this point. Nice solid game. Fast forward to 1979 against Robert Hubner, the German grandmaster, who was at around his peak at the time. Again, you can see the respect Tal showing. He's just playing the theory of the day. Both players castle queen side. And when I was playing e4, he's played this variation of Caro-Kann. It just seems like, natural to make these moves. And you can see again, Tal putting tremendous pressure on Huebner's position. He finally extracts a pawn. He's winning, and not only is he won a pawn, but White is now has a better pawn structure, and the bishop against the knight. Tal just shows good technique here and is finishing off his opponent. Of course, Huebner's only chance at this point is some kind of dynamic continuation, and he just simply resigned after 41 moves. Tilburg 1980, his Tal against Larson. Again, you can see his switch over to this more theoretical line, and he's abandoned, the knight to e2, knight f4 scenario, at least against the top GMs at this point. But again, you see the same trademark in the opening, which is rapid development and then a quick attack. He's castle queenside. He throws the pawns up. Of course, these guys are old rivals. Bent Larson and Tal met in the candidates twice, I believe, with them splitting the results there. I think Tal won the first time they met in '65, and I believe Larson won the second time they met. This particular game ended in a draw. His 1982 against Murray Chandler, who was rated lower than Tal at the time, 2470 English GM. Again, we see this Spassky variation from Tal. You see Tal has sacrificed a pawn for activity, but Black does a good job in curtailing that activity, and now White just finds himself down a pawn. And now Tal is desperately trying to hold the position here. After a few more moves, Tal, after a valiant effort, will have to just resign the position as there's no compensation for the pawn deficit. But you can see even to the end he was trying to create some type of activity. But Chandler, held his nerves, gradually traded off, and then the game was over as Chandler just had an extra piece. Now we finally reach our final game here, and this game took place in this line, Begonia 1984, and with the white pieces, English Grandmaster Anthony Miles, who's 2610 at the time. Again, we see by this time Tal is basically reverted to playing this main line against the Caro-Kann. And this is well-known position. Black is fine here, but it's a good position if you're white also. I mean, you got space for the end. You got a good position in the center. You got space with the h5 pawn when the end game ensues, and you got good development for your pieces. On the black side, you're extremely solid, and eventually you hope to get a break. If you could get an e5 break, then that would be great, a c5, and you just have to be patient. Queen c2, rook e7, knight to e5, bishop a5, Tal plays b4, avoiding the trade, a4, queen b8, and now f4. And we can see Tal is just pushing on both sides of the board, putting a lot of pressure on black. a5, g4. Again, with all of this space that white has, black is still pretty solid here. Okay, as long as black doesn't do anything egregious, black is okay. King a8. G5. Now C5. Queen B8. And now this is like a aesthetically pleasing position. Um, I mean, it's like look how much space White is occupying. He occupies the first 5 ranks of the board. But this shows you the resilience of the Caro-Kann. Now at this moment, Tal plays the move G6, and after F6, the tables just turn. He drives the, so we could say G6 is definitely ever. The knight is gone. All of a sudden, the pawn drops. Rook E2, knight C7, and this is a result of Tal overpressing. He tried to make something happen. There was really, and this is one of the reasons why many people like to play the Caro-Kann, because what happens is you get a position like that where you have all this space in your mind. Psychologically you think that you should have something, and it's just not happening, and then you try to force it, and then you end up under you end up under fire from a vicious counterattack. And this is what happens here. Miles just basically just breaks down the position that White had so proudly. Queen D8. Now he controls the D file. Tal has to retreat. King A7. So Black's king is well protected. And now White's king is drafty because he's advanced all of his pawns. So now once White's pieces are behind the pawn chain, now the king has to be on high alert. Bishop D2. Attacking the B pawn. Rook B1. So now Tal's pieces are forced into more passivity. Queen D5, pinning the knight to the king on A2, more passivity. King B3, and then just finishing off with Rook D3, and that is all she wrote. If check by the way, if King A4, then Rook C3. So here hitting the queen and the knight, and then a piece must go. And so Tal lost that game. All right, so let's conclude this. Let's wrap this up. Tal's response to this specific line against the Caro-Kann for Bishop F5. Um, he had an overall record of 8 wins, 5 defeats, and 7 draws. Uh, what to say? My final conclusion, would be that he had quite a difficult time facing the Caro-Kann. Uh, during his career. That line he was playing earlier, especially against Botvinnik, when he would bring the knight to F4, uh, he had mixed results with that. Only later, and then later on in his career, when he switched to the main line, he still had like up and down results. Like he had some wins over some couple of GMs, some international masters, but he also took his share of losses, as you can see by the record. And so my final conclusion is that, of course, Tao's an awesome player, like we all know that. But against the Caro-Kann, is a difficult opening for such a great attacking player, like even for Tao to deal with. And Caro-Kann is definitely uh, a good remedy to play against players that are specifically impatient and love to attack. We saw a few games where Tao sacrificed pieces right in the opening, and you know, just trying to open up the position or just get more out of the opponent. So I definitely think that this variation against him definitely gave him some troubles in his career, as played out by the Botvinnik matches. The 2 Botvinnik matches, 60 and 61. So that's my conclusion on that. I hope you enjoyed the video. Um, Please like and subscribe. Comment down below. Please check the links. Please donate if you can spare. And suggestions are welcome. And we'll see you shortly on the next series. Perhaps we'll look at another variation of the Caro-Kann. For instance, the knight f6, early knight f6 here. something like that. But we'll see. There's a lot of openings to look at. I like looking at different players' responses. But so that's my conclusion is that basically Caro-Kann was like kryptonite. Uh, to Tal, if we dare say such a thing.